10 90s action movies that deserved a sequel. The 1990s were full of incredible action movies that deserved a sequel, despite never really getting one. The 90s were responsible for some brilliant action movie franchises, from the Die Hard sequels to the continuation of James Cameron's Terminator, with one of the single greatest action films of all time. However, the decade also produced plenty of classic action films that, for whatever reason, continue to stand alone to this day as one-off adventures. In the modern age of filmmaking, the sequel rules all, with nearly every blockbuster that comes out having some form or another of brand recognition, thanks to sequels, prequels, spin-offs, and adaptations. Thus, it's hard to imagine that action films with even a modicum of success were allowed to remain untouched in their IP, no matter how much they may have deserved to see their stories continue. For one reason or another, some of the 90s most exciting action movies never got to see their universes expanded upon. Towards the end of Arnold Schwarzenegger's dominance as a movie star, True Lies remains one of the more underrated gems of the muscle-bound Austrian's filmography. The film posits Arnold as Harry, a U.S. government agent pretending to be a simple car salesman, fooling his family as to his true profession. What sounds like a corny comedic premise on paper turns out to be much more of a surprisingly compelling, action-packed story with plenty of impact. Interestingly, True Lies did end on a note that heavily implied a sequel could be in the works. Eventually, Harry's wife, Helen, is inducted into the family business and becomes a super spy herself, prompting the two of them to head out on a new mission as a power couple espionage duo in a new adventure. Sadly, 3 decades later, the outcome of this setup was never explored. Con Air was the pinnacle of the 90s and early 2000s fraud attempts to forge Nicolas Cage into a beloved action star with widespread appeal rather than the quirky horror character actor he was always meant to be. The film stars Cage as Cameron Poe, a highly decorated Army Ranger jailed for a crime he didn't commit. On the eve of his release, Poe is forced on a high-security plane full of the country's most dangerous criminals, only for an in-air mutiny to occur, putting his freedom in jeopardy. Con Air is a beautiful 90s time capsule, full of over-the-top characters from a time in which everything didn't need to be so market-tested. Steve Buscemi stars as a polite serial killer who befriends a little girl, and Nick Cage's southern drawl as Poe is endearingly hilarious. Sadly, the disaster premise action movie wasn't able to extend Poe's adventures in a new film the same way Die Hard was able to with its everyman protagonist. Con Air wasn't Nicolas Cage's only 90s action movie outing whose sequel went sadly unproduced. Face Off posits Cage as Castor Troy, an eccentric criminal mastermind who surgically swaps faces with his FBI agent nemesis, played by John Travolta. The result is an incredible dichotomy of John Travolta overacting in emulation of Nicolas Cage's overacting, while Cage does the same with Travolta's more reined and good guy. Face Off is pure unbridled 90s action joy, from the over-the-top performances from both leading stars to the incredible gun-fu action scenes, thanks to visionary director John Woo. Castor's gold-plated twin pistols gleaming in the carnage is an iconic image, and the tension of the vile criminal inhabiting Travolta's body and infiltrating his home life is genuinely palpable. While a sequel to Face Off has supposedly been in development for some time, no one is holding their breath that the ironically beloved classic will ever see a follow-up. While the superhero film had yet to accrue the same level of pop culture dominance the genre enjoys today, The Rocketeer was a stylish action movie that gave an earnest early attempt. Based off the 40s pulp hero of the same name, the film revolves around a stunt pilot who comes across a fantastic jetpack that allows him to soar through the sky without the need of a plane. Much to his own chagrin, the device is also highly sought after by NASA's, the FBI, and a fictionalized version of Howard Hughes. Oozing with energy and atmosphere, The Rocketeer is an exciting, modern reconstruction of early pulp sci-fi heroism. The film never managed to breach into household name territory, but for its dedicated cult following, the phenomenal cast and creative set design kept it relevant years later. Despite how the popularity of superheroes has continued to increase in the years since, no one has been brave enough to give The Rocketeer another spin. For as creative a science fiction world as The Fifth Element was able to create, the dreamy universe home to Lilu and Corbin Dallas somehow has never been explored for a second time. The bizarre action comedy stars Bruce Willis as Dallas, a down-on-his-luck cab driver who stumbles across an ancient cosmic secret in the form of a newly formed semi-human woman. It's up to them and a monk from a secretive order to help prevent the destruction of the Earth. The world of The Fifth Element is dripping with unexplored lore that is only ever hinted at, from the histories of the various alien races to the circumstances leading up to the cyberpunk dystopia that Earth has become. This makes it all the more surprising that the film was never afforded a sequel or spin-off of any kind, barring an obscure racing game for the PlayStation 2 titled NYR, New York Race. Regardless, the ZF-1 remains one of the most iconic action movie guns of all time. Sequels aren't as common in the Western genre, with every film bearing the description essentially being a sequel of its own in the way it enhances the setting. Still, if there was one Western from the 90s that deserved a dedicated follow-up, it's Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven. Directed by, produced by, and starring Clint Eastwood, the film follows an aging outlaw and gunslinger who comes out of retirement for one last job. The premise is eerily reflective of Clint Eastwood's own career at the time, having definitively aged out of such exciting roles by the time the early 90s rolled around. Indeed, Unforgiven is Eastwood's definitive last Western, though a sequel that examined his legacy through the eyes of a child or mentee wouldn't have gone amiss. The closest thing to an Unforgiven sequel is the 2013 remake of the same name, which reimagines the plot in a feudal Japan setting, as the reverse has been done many times throughout the history of Westerns.